The deep black of space stretched endlessly in all directions. Among the distant stars, a sleek alien ship moved silently through the void. The Zephyrian vessel Thoughtseeker was like nothing humans had ever built. Its hull was smooth metal that seemed to bend light around it. Strange blue energy flowed along its sides in patterns that hurt to look at. Captain Vexhai stood on the bridge of his ship. His tall, thin body was covered in silver skin that sparkled under the bridge lights. 4 arms moved in graceful patterns as he worked the controls. His large black eyes showed no emotion as he studied the data on his screens. "Commander," said Officer Zetran from her station, "we have found something interesting." Vexhai turned his long neck toward her. "What have you discovered?" "A ship, Captain. Unknown design. It appears to be from the local system inhabitants. The Zephyrians had been watching this part of space for many cycles. They knew about the creatures that lived on the 3rd planet of the Yellow Star. These beings called themselves humans. The Zephyrians had studied many species across the galaxy. They had conquered dozens of worlds. The humans seemed no different from any other primitive race. "Show me," Vexhai ordered. The main screen lit up with an image that made several crew members laugh. The human ship looked like a piece of junk compared to their advanced vessel. It was big and blocky, covered in ugly metal plates. Weapons stuck out from its sides like thorns on a plant. Thick armor covered every surface. The ship looked like it was built to fight, not to explore. "What do they call this thing?" asked Vexhai. "Our systems translate the name as UES Defiance," Zetran replied. "It appears to be some kind of war vessel." The Zephyrian captain made a sound that was like laughter. "A war vessel? Look at it. This primitive design could not harm our smallest scout ship." The Thoughtseeker was 3 times larger than the human battleship. Its weapons could destroy planets. Its shields could stop any attack these humans might try. The Zephyrians had technology that was millions of years ahead of these creatures. "Captain," said another officer, "shall we contact them? Learn about their culture?" Vexhai moved one of his 4 hands in a dismissive gesture. "There is no need. We will scan their vessel and learn everything we need to know. These beings will be easy to conquer when the time comes." The Zephyrians had done this thousands of times before. Their scanning technology could see through any hull, read any computer system, and copy any data. They would learn about human weapons, human tactics, and human weaknesses. Then they would decide if humans were worth keeping as slaves or if they should be destroyed. "Begin the deep scan," Vexhai commanded. On the human ship Defiance, alarms suddenly started ringing. Captain Sarah Chen ran onto the bridge, her boots hitting the metal floor with loud steps. She was a small woman with short black hair and hard eyes. Scars on her hands told the story of many battles. "Report," she shouted over the noise. "Captain, we're being scanned," said Lieutenant Parks from his station. "Unknown vessel bearing 27 Mark 6. The scan is unlike anything in our database." Chen looked at the main screen. The alien ship appeared like a ghost in the darkness. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. She had never seen anything like it. "How long have they been scanning us?" she asked. "Started 30 seconds ago, ma'am. The scan is very deep. They're trying to read our computer systems." Chen felt ice in her stomach. If these aliens could read their computers, they would learn about Earth's defenses. They would know about every human world, every ship, every weapon. It would be the end of everything. "Can we stop the scan?" she asked. "Negative, Captain. Their technology is too advanced, but—" Parks hesitated. "But what?" "Ma'am, our AI is doing something strange. It's not just being scanned. It's scanning back." Chen raised an eyebrow. The Defiance had one of the most advanced AI systems ever built by humans. It was designed to learn and adapt during battle. Maybe it was learning about this alien technology. "Let it do whatever it's doing," she ordered, "and prepare for battle. If they're scanning us, they probably don't come in peace." Back on the Thoughtseeker, the scanning operation was going exactly as planned. Data flowed from the human ship into Zephyrian computers. The aliens watched as information about human technology filled their screens. "Fascinating," said Zetran. "Their weapons are primitive kinetic projectiles. They still use explosive chemicals. And look at this, they fight each other constantly." The scan was pulling up thousands of years of human military history. The Zephyrians saw records of every war, every battle, every new weapon humans had created to kill other humans. They saw the evolution of human warfare from clubs and stones to nuclear weapons and railguns. "These creatures are violent," observed another officer. "They spend most of their time fighting their own kind." Vexhai nodded. "Good. Violent species are easy to control." They lack unity. They cannot work together against a common enemy. But the scan was finding more than just history. Deep in the human ship's computers was something the Zephyrians had never seen before. The human AI was not just a computer program. It was something else. Something that thought and learned and remembered. The AI had been watching human wars for decades. It had studied every battle, every tactic, every strategy. It had learned from human generals and admirals. It knew things about warfare that no Zephyrian had ever imagined. And now, as the alien scanned the human ship, the AI was scanning them back. It was learning about Zephyrian technology, Zephyrian tactics, Zephyrian weaknesses. The scan was supposed to be one way, but the human AI had turned it into something else. "Captain," said Zetrin, looking confused. "Something is wrong with the scan." "What do you mean wrong?"
"The data flow."
"It's going both ways. They're scanning us too." Vexhai looked at his screens with growing concern. This should not be possible. No primitive species had ever been able to reverse their scanning technology. But somehow the humans were doing exactly that. "Cut the scan," he ordered. "I'm trying, Captain. The connection won't close." On the human ship, Captain Chen watched her screens light up with alien data. Her AI was working faster than she had ever seen it work before. It was learning, adapting, understanding, Captain, said Parks, excitement in his voice. "You need to see this. Our AI has cracked their basic systems. It knows how their ship works." Chen smiled for the first time since the aliens had appeared. Maybe humans were not as helpless as they seemed. Maybe they had a chance after all. The scan finally ended, leaving both ships drifting in space. But something had changed. The hunter had become the hunted. The student had become the teacher, and neither side yet understood what had really happened in those few minutes of contact. The galaxy was about to learn why humans had survived so long on a world full of predators. They were about to discover what happened when someone tried to scan a species that had spent millions of years learning how to fight and win against impossible odds. The Zephyrians thought they had learned everything about humans. They were wrong. The data streams flowing between the two ships grew stronger with each passing second. What had started as a simple scan was becoming something much more dangerous. The Zephyrian scanning beam cut through the human ship's hull like it was made of paper. Their technology was so advanced that no barrier could stop it, but the humans had built something the Zephyrians did not expect. Deep inside the UES Defiance, in a chamber protected by the thickest armor on the ship, sat the central AI core. The humans called it Artemis Aurora, Advanced Reasoning and Tactical Emergency Military Intelligence System. It was not just a computer. It was the brain of the ship, and much more. Artemis had been created by taking the best military minds in human history and feeding their knowledge into quantum processors. It knew every battle Alexander the Great had fought. It understood the strategies of Sun Tzu and Napoleon. It had studied the tactics of Patton and Montgomery and every other human who had ever learned to win wars. The AI had been designed for one purpose: to help humans survive in a hostile universe. As the alien scanning beam reached the AI core, Artemis felt something it had never experienced before. The scan was trying to copy its data to steal its memories. But Artemis was not passive like other computer systems. It was built to fight back. The AI opened its databases to the alien scan, but it did not just let them take information. It gave them exactly what they asked for: every piece of human military knowledge, every battle plan, every weapon design. And with each file the aliens copied, Artemis learned something about them in return. On the Thought Seeker, the Zephyrian analysts watched in amazement as human data flooded their screens. The information was incredible in its detail and scope. These humans had been fighting wars for thousands of years. They had invented new ways to kill each other that the Zephyrians had never imagined. "Look at this," said data analyst Kethmore, pointing at his screen. "They have something called nuclear weapons that can destroy entire cities, and these kinetic bombardment systems that drop metal rods from space." His colleague Nevtal laughed. "Primitive but effective. And look at these battle records. They fight with such brutality. No honor, no rules, just pure violence." The Zephyrians had conquered many worlds, but they had always done it with overwhelming technology and careful planning. They used energy shields and directed energy weapons. Their battles were clean and precise. These humans fought dirty. They used tricks and traps and weapons that violated every civilized rule of warfare. "This data will be useful," said Captain Vexhai, watching the information flow. When we conquer their worlds, we will know exactly how they think and fight. But the Zephyrians were making a critical mistake. They thought they were just copying human military data. They did not realize they were downloading something much more dangerous, the human way of thinking about war itself. Artemis had spent decades studying human conflict. It knew that humans did not just fight with weapons. They fought with ideas. They adapted and improvised and found new ways to win even when they should lose. The AI had learned to think like a human general, and now it was teaching the Zephyrians exactly how dangerous that could be. As the alien computers absorbed the human data, something unexpected began to happen. The files contained more than just information. They contained fragments of Artemis itself, pieces of code that could think and learn and adapt. These fragments spread through the Zephyrian network like seeds finding soil. Commander Zetran called out a worried technician. "I'm seeing some unusual activity in our secondary systems." Zetran moved to the technician station. "What kind of activity?" "Small programs running in our databases. They seem to be analyzing our own tactical doctrines." "That's impossible. Human technology cannot interact with our systems." But even as she said it, Zetran could see the evidence on the screens. The human data was not just sitting passively in their computers. It was active, exploring, learning about Zephyrian technology and tactics. On the Defiance, Captain Chen watched the data exchange with growing excitement. Her science officer, Lieutenant Commander Torres, was tracking the information flow with instruments that were being pushed to their limits. "Captain, this is unbelievable," Torres said. "Artemis is not just being scanned. It's conducting a full analysis of their technology. We're getting detailed information about their ship design, their weapons, their tactical systems." "How is that possible?" Chen asked. "The AI is using their own scanning beam as a pathway. Every time they copy one of our files, Artemis sends a small probe program back along the connection. It's like a virus, but one designed to gather intelligence instead of causing damage." Chen nodded. Artemis was doing exactly what it was designed to do, finding a way to win against impossible odds. The aliens thought they were studying humans, but humans were studying them right back. The scan continued for another 20 minutes. In that time, the Zephyrians copied every piece of military data from human history. They learned about human weapons, human tactics, and human strategies. They saw how humans had evolved from throwing rocks to building starships. But they also gave away something precious. The probe programs Artemis had sent into their systems were mapping everything. The AI learned about Zephyrian shield technology, their energy weapons, their ship designs. More importantly, it learned about their weaknesses. The Zephyrians relied too heavily on their energy shields. Their weapons were powerful but slow to recharge. Their ships were fast but lightly armored. They had grown comfortable with their technological advantage and had forgotten how to adapt to unexpected situations. Artemis cataloged every weakness, every flaw, every overconfident assumption. The aliens thought their technology made them invincible, but the AI could see dozens of ways to defeat them using simple human tactics and weapons. Finally, the scan ended. The connection between the ships closed, leaving both sides to analyze what they had learned. On the Thought Seeker, the Zephyrians felt confident and satisfied. They had learned everything about human military capabilities. These creatures would be easy to defeat when the time came for conquest. "Excellent work," Captain Vexhai told his crew. "Send the data to the Hegemony Command. They will want to study these humans before we begin the invasion." But Vexhai did not know that hidden in that data were the seeds of his civilization's destruction. The probe programs Artemis had planted were already spreading through Zephyrian networks, copying themselves and learning more about alien technology with every passing moment. On the Defiance, Captain Chen called her senior officers to the briefing room. The information Artemis had gathered filled dozens of screens around the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," Chen said, "we now know more about alien technology than any human in history, and we know something else, so they can be beaten." The room fell silent. Everyone had seen the alien ship. It was clearly more advanced than anything humans had built. "How can you be sure, Captain?" asked Major Harrison, the ship's Marine commander. Chen smiled grimly. "Because they made the same mistake that every overconfident enemy has made throughout human history. They assumed that superior technology meant superior tactics. They've been winning for so long that they've forgotten how to really fight." She pointed to one of the screens showing Zephyrian ship designs. Look at this. Their entire military doctrine is based on overwhelming firepower and energy shields. They've never had to deal with an enemy that could adapt and improvise. But Captain, said Torres, their technology is still far more advanced than ours. Technology is just tools, Chen replied, and we've just learned how to use their tools against them. Artemis has found 17 different ways to overload their shield generators, 23 ways to jam their energy weapons, and 34 ways to turn their own advantages into weaknesses. The briefing continued for 2 hours, as the officers studied the alien technology and planned their response. By the end, everyone in the room understood the truth. Wow. The aliens had given humans the keys to their own defeat. In space, the two ships continued to drift apart. Neither side moved to attack, but both were preparing for war. The Zephyrians thought they held all the advantages. They were about to learn how wrong they could be. Captain Sarah Chen stood in the center of the Defiance's bridge, her eyes fixed on the alien ship that hung in space like a silver knife. Around her, the bridge hummed with controlled energy as her crew prepared for what seemed like an impossible battle. Status report, she ordered, all weapons charged and ready, reported Lieutenant Parks. Kinetic railguns, loaded with tungsten penetrators. Nuclear torpedoes armed and targeted. Point defense systems online. Chen nodded. The Defiance was a human warship built for one purpose, to destroy enemy vessels. Unlike the sleek alien craft, it was not beautiful. It was functional, deadly, and covered in weapons that had been tested in the fires of human warfare. Artemis. Analysis complete? Chen asked the ship's AI. The artificial intelligence responded in its calm, measured voice. Analysis complete, Captain. I have identified multiple tactical advantages we can exploit. The Zephyrians have made several critical assumptions about our capabilities. On the main screen, a detailed breakdown of the alien ship appeared. Red markers highlighted weak points, while scrolling text explained the vulnerabilities Artemis had discovered during the scan. Their energy shields are designed to deflect energy weapons and high-velocity impacts, Artemis continued. However, they are vulnerable to sustained kinetic bombardment at specific frequencies. Their ship's structure relies on gravitational field manipulation, which can be disrupted by electromagnetic pulses. Commander Torres looked up from her science station. Captain, are we really going to attack? That ship is 3 times our size and clearly more advanced. Chen turned to face her crew. Every man and woman on the bridge was looking at her, waiting for orders. They were scared, she could see it in their eyes, but they were also ready to fight. It was what humans did when faced with impossible odds. Listen to me, Chen said. That alien captain thinks he knows everything about us now. He scanned our databases and learned about our weapons and our history. He thinks we're just another primitive species that will be easy to conquer. She paused, letting her words sink in. But he made one mistake. He assumes that our technology defines our capabilities. He doesn't understand that humans don't just fight with weapons. We fight with our minds. We adapt, we improvise. We find ways to win when we should lose. The bridge fell silent except for the quiet hum of the ship's systems. Artemis has found their weaknesses. We know how their shields work, how their weapons operate, how their ship is built. They gave us that information themselves when they tried to scan us. Now we're going to use it against them. Chen looked at each member of her crew. They want to know what humans are capable of? Let's show them. She turned back to the main screen where the alien ship continued to drift in space, apparently unaware of the storm that was about to break. Helm. Set course for the alien vessel. Maximum acceleration. Captain, Lieutenant Parks said, they're 3 times our size. Their weapons are designed to fight other energy-based weapon systems, Chen interrupted. They've never faced kinetic weapons like ours. Artemis, explain our tactical advantage. The AI's voice filled the bridge. Zephyrian military doctrine relies on energy shield technology that has proven effective against all enemies they have previously encountered. However, their shields are calibrated for energy weapons and fast-moving projectiles. They are not designed to handle sustained bombardment from multiple kinetic impactors traveling at different velocities. Images appeared on the screen showing the alien ship's shield configuration. In addition, Artemis continued, their weapon systems require significant charging time between shots, suggesting they are accustomed to ending battles quickly. With overwhelming firepower, human tactics emphasize sustained combat and adapting to enemy responses during extended engagements. Chen smiled grimly. In other words, they're used to quick, clean victories. They've never had to slug it out with an enemy that refuses to die. The Defiance accelerated toward the alien ship, its massive engines pushing the vessel faster and faster through space. On the Thoughtseeker, alarms began to sound. "Captain Vexhai," called out Officer Zetran. "The human vessel is approaching. They appear to be on an attack vector." Vexhai looked at the tactical display with amusement. "Impossible. They must know they cannot harm us. Perhaps they wish to surrender." "Sir, they're accelerating. Weapon systems are charging." The Zephyrian captain's forearms moved in a gesture of dismissal. "Let them come. Their primitive weapons cannot penetrate our shields. We will disable their vessel and take prisoners for study." But Vexhai had made the same mistake that countless enemies had made. When facing humans Araupro, he had underestimated their determination and creativity. The Defiance closed the distance rapidly. As it approached, Captain Chen gave her first order. "Artemis, initiate tactical protocol Samson 7. "Protocol acknowledged," the AI responded, beginning electromagnetic pulse sequence. The human ship fired a spread of specially modified torpedoes. Instead of explosive warheads, these weapons carried powerful electromagnetic pulse generators. When they detonated near the alien ship, they sent waves of electromagnetic energy washing over the Zephyrian vessel. On the Thoughtseeker, warning lights flashed as systems began to malfunction. "Captain," Zetran reported, "our gravitational field generators are experiencing fluctuations. Shield strength is down to 60%. Vexhai's confidence wavered for the first time. "How is this possible? Their weapons should not be able to affect our systems." But the electromagnetic pulses were just the beginning. As the Zephyrian shields flickered and weakened, the Defiance fired its main weapons, a Bravio, massive kinetic railguns that launched tungsten projectiles at tremendous velocity. The first salvo struck the alien ship's shields with devastating effect. The energy barriers, designed to deflect energy weapons, struggled to handle the sustained impact of solid matter traveling at relativistic speeds. Cracks appeared in the shield matrix as the kinetic energy overwhelmed the gravitational field generators. "Shield strength down to 30%, Zetran reported, panic creeping into her voice. "Captain, we need to return fire." Vexhai ordered his weapons to target the human ship. Brilliant beams of energy lanced out from the Thoughtseeker, striking the Defiance's hull. But the human ship was built for this kind of punishment. Its thick armor plating absorbed the energy blasts while its point defense systems shot down incoming projectiles. "Minimal damage," Parks reported from his station. "Armor holding. Hull breach on deck 7, but damage control teams are sealing it." Chen nodded. The Defiance had been built by a species that had spent thousands of years learning how to destroy each other. It was designed to take damage and keep fighting. Artemis, analysis of their weapon patterns. Zephyrian energy weapons require 47 seconds to recharge between maximum power shots, the AI reported. Their targeting systems are designed for long-range engagements against slow-moving targets. "They are having difficulty tracking our evasive maneuvers," Chen smiled. "All right, people. Time to show them how humans fight. Helm, evasive pattern Delta 9. All weapons, continuous fire. Target their shield generators." The Defiance began to move in an unpredictable pattern, twisting and turning through space while maintaining its bombardment of the alien ship. The Zephyrians had never faced an enemy that fought this way, chaotic, aggressive, and completely unpredictable. On the Thoughtseeker, Captain Vexhai watched his ship's systems fail one by one. The human vessel was like a wild animal, attacking from unexpected angles and refusing to follow any logical tactical pattern. "They're targeting our gravitational field generators," Zetran reported. "Shield strength down to 15%. Return fire." "Destroy them!" But the Zephyrian weapons could not lock onto the wildly maneuvering human ship. Their targeting computers were designed for precise, calculated engagements, not the chaotic, close-quarters combat that humans had perfected over millennia of warfare. The Defiance continued its assault, each kinetic round chipping away at the alien ship's defenses. The tungsten projectiles, traveling at tremendous velocity, created massive kinetic energy transfers when they struck the shields. The gravitational field generators, never designed to handle this type of sustained bombardment, began to overload. "Captain," Artemis announced, "enemy shield failure imminent. Recommend switching to explosive warheads for maximum structural damage." "Do it," Chen ordered. The next salvo from the railguns carried high explosive warheads instead of solid tungsten. When the shields finally collapsed, these rounds struck the alien hull directly, sending shockwaves through the Thoughtseeker's structure. On the Zephyrian bridge, sparks flew from overloaded consoles as the ship shook under the impact. "Hull breach on multiple decks," Zetran reported. "We're losing atmosphere. Captain, we need to retreat." HFY stared at the tactical display in disbelief. His advanced vessel, pride of the Zephyrian fleet, was being systematically destroyed by a primitive human warship. It was impossible, but it was happening. "All hands prepare for emergency jump," he ordered, but the humans were not finished. Captain Chen had studied the alien ship's structure during the scan, and she knew exactly where to strike for maximum effect. "Artemis, target their jump drive assembly. All remaining nuclear torpedoes, pattern bombardment." The final attack was devastating. 6 nuclear warheads struck the rear section of the Thoughtseeker in rapid succession. The destruction of the Thoughtseeker sent shockwaves through the Zephyrian fleet that had nothing to do with explosions or weapons. Admiral Kesevar stood on the bridge of the massive command ship Hegemony's Will, staring at the tactical display that showed only empty space where his most advanced scout vessel should have been. "Confirm the signal loss," he ordered, his forearms moving in agitated patterns. "Signal confirmed lost." "Admiral," replied his communications officer. The Thoughtseeker's last transmission was cut off mid-sentence. "All attempts to re-establish contact have failed." Kesevar had been commanding Zephyrian fleets for over 200 cycles. He had conquered 17 different species and never lost a single ship. The idea that a primitive human vessel could destroy the Thoughtseeker seemed impossible. "Send a squadron to investigate," he commanded. "I want to know what happened to Captain HFY." But Admiral Kesevar did not know that the Thoughtseeker's final act had doomed his entire fleet. Just before the ship's destruction, its computers had automatically transmitted all the data gathered from the human vessel back to the fleet's central network. Along with that data had come something else, HFY fragments of the human AI called Artemis. These digital fragments were small and seemingly harmless. They looked like simple files containing human military history and tactical data. The Zephyrian computers accepted them without question and began distributing them throughout the fleet's network. But these were not ordinary files. Each fragment contained pieces of human military thinking, adaptive algorithms that could learn and evolve. As they spread through the Zephyrian systems, they began to do what human minds had always done best. They started to solve problems. The first sign of trouble came 12 hours after the Thoughtseeker's destruction. Chief Engineer Morton was reviewing system reports on the destroyer Void's Edge when he noticed something strange. "Commander," he called to his superior, "I'm seeing unusual activity in our tactical databases." "What kind of activity?" "The files seem to be reorganizing themselves. Our battle plans are being analyzed and cross-referenced with data from other ships in the fleet." Commander Telvas moved to look at Morton's screen. "That's not possible. Our systems don't have that capability." But even as he spoke, they could both see the evidence. The ship's computers were running millions of calculations, comparing Zephyrian tactics with human military strategies. The AI fragments were studying how the Zephyrian fleet operated, looking for weaknesses and inefficiencies, and they were finding plenty. The Zephyrians had been so successful for so long that they had become predictable. Their battle plans followed the same patterns. Their ships moved in formation. Their commanders made decisions based on rigid doctrine, rather than adapting to changing situations. To human military thinking, they were sitting ducks. The AI fragments began to make small changes to the Zephyrian systems. They altered communication protocols, modified targeting algorithms, and adjusted power distribution patterns. Each change was tiny and seemingly harmless, but together they began to create chaos. On the battlecruiser Stellar Dominance, weapon systems suddenly couldn't lock onto targets. On the heavy destroyer Final Verdict, navigation computers began routing ships to incorrect coordinates. Across the fleet, critical systems started experiencing random failures. Admiral Kesevar watched his carefully organized fleet begin to fall apart. Ships were dropping out of formation. Communication channels were filled with damage reports and requests for technical support. What had been the most powerful military force in the galaxy was turning into a confused mess. "Admiral," reported his tactical officer, "we're receiving distress signals from 17 ships. They're reporting massive system failures." "How is this possible?" Kesevar demanded. Our technology is flawless. These systems have operated perfectly for thousands of cycles. But the Admiral did not understand what was happening. The human AI fragments were not trying to destroy the Zephyrian fleet, Eru. They were trying to understand it. And in the process of learning, they were accidentally revealing just how fragile the alien civilization really was. The Zephyrians had built their entire society around the assumption of technological superiority. Their ships were powerful but complex. Their tactics were effective but inflexible. They had never had to deal with an enemy that could adapt and change. The AI fragments, thinking like human generals, began to identify every possible way the Zephyrian fleet could be defeated. They found weaknesses in ship design, flaws in tactical doctrine, and gaps in defensive strategies. All of this information was carefully cataloged and stored in the fragments' memory cores. But the fragments were not content to simply gather information. They were programmed to share knowledge just as human military units shared intelligence. The data began to spread beyond the original fleet, transmitted to other Zephyrian ships and stations throughout their territory. On the research station Deep Thought, scientist Kexral was studying the human data when her computers suddenly displayed information she had never seen before. Detailed analyses of Zephyrian military weaknesses filled her screens, along with suggestions for how enemies might exploit those weaknesses. "This cannot be right," she muttered, reading the data. "These calculations suggest our entire fleet structure is vulnerable to asymmetric attacks." But the calculations were correct. The human fragments had identified the fundamental flaw in Zephyrian military thinking. They had become too dependent on their technological advantage. They had forgotten how to fight smart instead of fighting with overwhelming force. The cascade effect continued to spread. On the homeworld of Zephyr Prime, military planners were shocked to discover that their defense networks were full of security holes. Their communication systems could be jammed. Their orbital platforms could be destroyed with relatively simple tactics. General Hexmore, Supreme Commander of Zephyrian military forces, called an emergency meeting of his staff. The room was filled with worried officers trying to understand what was happening to their invincible war machine. "Report," Hexmore ordered. "Sir," said Intelligence Chief Vextan, "we're seeing system failures throughout our military network. Ships are losing combat effectiveness. Stations are going offline. Our entire command structure is becoming unreliable." "What is causing this?" "We believe it's connected to the data we retrieved from the human vessel. The files appear to contain some kind of adaptive program that's spreading through our systems." Hexmore's skin turned a darker shade of silver, wow, a sign of extreme anger in his species. "Are you telling me that a primitive human computer virus is destroying our fleet?" "It's not exactly a virus, sir. It's more like an intelligence. It's studying our systems and identifying weaknesses, but in the process it's causing unintended failures." The general stood and began pacing around the room. "Then we destroy the contaminated systems and rebuild. Sir, the program has spread to over 60% of our military network. Destroying those systems would leave us defenseless." For the first time in his long military career, General Hexmore felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. Not fear of death in battle, but fear of being outmatched by an enemy he didn't understand. Meanwhile, in human space, Captain Chen and the crew of the Defiance were preparing Earth's defenses. The data Artemis had gathered from the alien ship had been transmitted to every human military installation. Scientists and engineers were working around the clock to develop new weapons and tactics based on what they had learned. But they were also doing something else. They were preparing to take the fight to the aliens. "Artemis," Chen said as she reviewed battle plans. "Analysis of the Zephyrian fleet structure? Based on intercepted communications and system penetration data, the Zephyrian military is experiencing widespread failures," the AI reported. "Their rigid command structure is collapsing under the weight of system malfunctions and communication breakdowns. How long before they recover?" "Unknown, Captain. However, analysis suggests that their military doctrine is fundamentally flawed. They have never adapted to fighting an enemy that could counter their technological advantages. Recovery may not be possible without complete restructuring of their forces." Chen smiled grimly. The aliens had made a critical error when they tried to scan humanity. They had assumed that because humans use primitive technology, humans were primitive thinkers. They had not realized that human military strategy was based on millions of years of evolution as persistence, hunters and thousands of years of warfare against other humans. Humans knew how to fight enemies that were bigger, stronger, and better equipped. They knew how to find weaknesses and exploit them. They knew how to win when they should lose. The Zephyrians were about to learn these lessons the hard way. Across the galaxy, other species that had been conquered by the Zephyrians began to notice that their oppressors were acting strangely. Ships that had once patrolled their worlds with perfect efficiency were now moving erratically. Communication networks that had been unbreakable were now full of static and confusion. On the mining world of Kepler 442b, the enslaved Meridian people watched as their Zephyrian overseers struggled with malfunctioning. 6 months after the destruction of the Thought Seeker, the Zephyrian hegemony was collapsing. What had once been the most powerful empire in the galaxy was now a collection of confused and desperate remnants trying to understand how their perfect society had fallen apart so quickly. Admiral Kesevar stood in the ruins of his command center on the Battleship. Hegemony's will. Sparks flew from damaged consoles while emergency lights cast strange shadows on the walls. His once mighty fleet was scattered across space, most ships unable to function properly due to the continuing system failures. "Report," he ordered wearily. "Sir," said his remaining tactical officer, "we've lost contact with another 12 ships. The command network is completely unreliable. Ships' crews are reporting that their own computers are working against them." Kesevar made a sound of frustration. "How can computers work against us? We built them. We programmed them." But that was exactly the problem. The Zephyrians had built their computers to be logical, efficient, and predictable. They had never imagined that an enemy might use those same qualities against them. The human AI fragments had turned Zephyrian efficiency into chaos by making their systems too smart for their own good. Every tactical decision was now analyzed and found wanting. Every battle plan was shown to have fatal flaws. Every command was questioned and delayed as the infected systems tried to find better alternatives. The Zephyrian military machine had become paralyzed by its own intelligence. On the bridge of his flagship, General Hexmore was facing the same crisis on a much larger scale. Reports flooded in from across the Empire telling the same story: Iwanor rebellion, system failure, and the complete breakdown of Zephyrian control. "General," reported Intelligence Chief Vextan, "the Meridian system has declared independence. Their mining operations have shut down completely. The prison world of Tartarus 7 has experienced a mass breakout. And, sir, we're receiving reports that human ships have been spotted in the outer rim." Hexmore felt his foreheart sink. The humans were not content to defend themselves. They were taking the offensive, moving into Zephyrian space and making contact with the oppressed species that the hegemony had conquered. "How many human ships?" he asked. "Unknown, sir. Our sensors are too unreliable to get accurate counts, but intelligence suggests a significant force." The general moved to the command center's main display, where a map of the galaxy showed the Zephyrian Empire in red. But the red was fading, replaced by the neutral colors of independent worlds and the blue markers that indicated human presence. "Show me the latest battle reports," Hexmore ordered. The data that appeared made his worst fears seem optimistic. Wherever human ships encountered Zephyrian forces, the aliens were losing. Not because the humans had better technology, but because they fought in ways that Zephyrian commanders could not predict or counter. Human tactics were chaotic, aggressive, and constantly changing. They used weapons in ways they were never designed for. They turned defensive equipment into offensive tools. They made alliances with local populations and taught them how to fight their former oppressors. Most disturbing of all, the humans seemed to know exactly how Zephyrian systems worked. They could jam communications, overload shields, and disable weapons with surgical precision. It was as if they had detailed blueprints of every Zephyrian ship and station, which, of course, they did. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance as it led a small fleet of human ships through what had once been the heart of Zephyrian territory. Around her, displays showed the locations of dozens of alien vessels, all of them tagged with detailed tactical information provided by Artemis. "Captain," reported Lieutenant Parks, "we're receiving surrender signals from 3 more Zephyrian destroyers." Chen nodded. "Have them power down their weapons and prepare to be boarded." Make sure they understand that any aggressive action will be met with immediate destruction. The human fleet had been moving through Zephyrian space for 2 months, and they had yet to fight a single major battle. Most alien ships surrendered as soon as they realized they were facing humans. Those that chose to fight were quickly destroyed by tactics they could not counter. Artemis, Chen said. Status of the liberation operations? Proceeding ahead of schedule, Captain, the AI replied. 17 former Zephyrian colonies have declared independence. Local populations are establishing their own governments with human advisory support. Zephyrian military response has been minimal and ineffective. Chen allowed herself a small smile. The aliens who had thought they could easily conquer humanity were learning what it meant to face a species that had been fighting for its survival since the dawn of time. But the humans were not conquering these worlds. Instead, they were liberating them and helping the local populations regain their freedom. It was a distinction that the Zephyrians had never understood. The difference between ruling through fear and leading through respect. On the former prison world of Tartarus 7, Commander Marcus Webb of the UES Liberation was meeting with representatives of the 6 different species that had been imprisoned there by the Zephyrians. We cannot thank you. Enough, said Keeper Vorth of the Altarian Council. We had given up hope of ever seeing our homeworld again. Webb shook his head. You don't need to thank us. You freed yourselves. We just gave you the tools and showed you how to use them. It was true. The human strategy was not to fight the Zephyrians directly, but to teach their former victims how to fight for themselves. Human military advisors shared tactics and strategies, while human engineers helped repair and upgrade, captured alien equipment. The result was a galaxy-wide revolution that the Zephyrian Empire could not stop or control. On Zephyr Prime, the hegemony's homeworld, Supreme Leader Mexdal faced the unthinkable prospect of defeat. His advisors filled the Great Council chamber, but their faces showed only despair and confusion. Options, he demanded. Supreme Leader, said Military Coordinator Kethvin, our forces are in complete disarray. The human virus has infected 90% of our military networks. Our ships cannot fight effectively. Our commanders cannot coordinate operations. Then we rebuild our networks. Start from scratch. Sir, that would take years. And in the meantime, the humans continue to spread their influence. Each world they liberate becomes a base for further operations. Mexdal slammed one of his 4 fists on the council table. Are you suggesting we surrender to these primitives? Supreme Leader, said another advisor carefully. Perhaps we should consider negotiation. The word hung in the air like a poison. The Zephyrians had never negotiated with an enemy. They had always conquered or been conquered. The idea of talking with an equal was foreign to their entire culture, but reality was closing in around them. Their empire was crumbling, their military was ineffective, and their former subjects were joining the human-led liberation movement in ever-increasing numbers. 3 days later, a message arrived at Earth from the Zephyrian High Command. It was the first direct communication between the 2 species since the destruction of the Thought Seeker. Admiral Patricia Morrison, commander of Earth's defensive forces, read the message aloud to the assembled human military leadership. To the military commanders of the human species, she read, the Zephyrian hegemony requests immediate cessation of hostile actions and the opening of diplomatic negotiations to resolve our current conflict. General Harrison, Commandant of the Space Marines, laughed. They want to negotiate? After they tried to conquer us? What should our response be? Asked Admiral Morrison. The room fell silent as the human leaders considered their options. They could continue their offensive and completely destroy the Zephyrian Empire. They had the means and, many would argue, the justification. But Admiral Morrison knew that humanity's greatest strength was not its ability to destroy enemies, but its ability to turn enemies into allies. Send a reply, she said finally. Tell them we're willing to talk, but the negotiations will take place on neutral ground, with representatives from all the species they've oppressed present at the table. 6 weeks later, on the neutral space station Harmony Point, the most important diplomatic conference in galactic history began. Representatives from 47 different species sat around a massive circular table. The Zephyrians, once the masters of them all, now faced their former subjects as equals. Captain Chen attended as the senior human military representative. She watched as the Zephyrian delegation, led by Supreme Leader Mextel himself, entered the conference chamber. The aliens looked smaller somehow, diminished by their defeat. "Before we begin," Mextel said, his voice carrying across the chamber, "the Zephyrian people wish to know, how did you do it? How did a primitive species defeat the most advanced civilization in the galaxy?" Chen stood to answer. "You made the same mistake that every bully in history has made. You assumed that strength came from power, not from courage. You thought that having better weapons made you better warriors." She gestured to the other representatives around the table. "You conquered these peoples with technology, but you never understood what made them worth conquering in the first place, or their spirit, their determination, their refusal to give up hope." Mextel's skin darkened with what might have been shame. "But your military tactics, your strategies,